I'm Julia, a bookseller at Politics and Prose. We're live with Meg Bashwiner, Joseph Fink, and Dylan Marron discussing the first 10 years, two sides of the same love story. You can follow the link in the chat to purchase the book directly from us at Politics and Prose. If you have a question for our speakers, please use the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to everyone's questions in the last portion of the discussion, though we apologize in advance if we run short on time. Additionally, we're glad to offer closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To enable captions, click the CC live transcript icon at the bottom of the screen. And before we jump in, we do want to thank all of you out there for joining us. We're really thankful to our family of loyal customers who keep our business and our spirits afloat. It's my pleasure to introduce this exciting new book. In a candid, soul-bearing memoir, Joseph and Meg recount their first 10 years together, each telling their story as they remember it, without having consulted the other. We hear both sides of their first kiss, first breakup, first getting back together, the death of a father, marriage, international fame, world tours, mental illness, and discussions about having children. Sometimes they recall things differently. Neither agrees on who paid for the morning after pill on their first date. Sometimes they remember the exact same details in the same way, but still have their own narrative on just what those details mean. Poignant, funny, and real, alternately told in Joseph and Meg's remarkably different yet equally compelling voices, the first 10 years is the story of two individuals finding their way in the world and becoming adults as they learn to become a couple. Meg Bashwiner is a writer, performer, producer, and tour manager. She lives in the Hudson River Valley and Los Angeles. Joseph Fink is the creator of the Welcome to Night Vale and Alice Isn't Dead podcasts, and the New York Times bestselling author of Welcome to Night Vale, It Devours, and The Faceless Old Woman Who Secretly Lives in Your Home, and Alice Isn't Dead. He is also the author of the middle grade novel, The Halloween Moon. He and his wife, Meg, have written the memoir, The First 10 Years They Lived Together in the Hudson River Valley. Moderating this evening is Dylan Marron, a Webby-winning digital creator. He hosts and produces the podcast Conversations with People Who Hate Me. His forthcoming book, Snowflake, will be published by Atria in 2022. On behalf of Politics and Prose, please join me in welcoming Meg Bashwiner, Joseph Fink, and Dylan Marron. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Julia. Hi, guys. This is so exciting.
Hi, Dylan.
Hi, Dylan. Thank you.
Book birthday.
Yeah.
It's like today's the day.
It is.
So this is very first stop on the book tour.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you're going far for your book tour. So this is so exciting. How are you feeling? This is a very, very, very revealing, and I mean that in the best way, book. How does it feel that this is now out in the world?
It's kind of like this double scary where you want everyone to read it because you want your book to do well, because that's like the measure of success in this world is to have your book do well and make your publisher happy and have a sense of pride around how it goes. But also you're like, oh, people are going to know. The more people who read this are the more people who get to know these very intimate details about our lives, which is I'm not a stranger to. I've always worked in nonfiction and nonfiction storytelling with you, with the neo-futurists. So it's, for me, that's kind of always been the best kind of art, is the most honest stuff. So, but it's definitely bigger when it's on a broader scale like this. It's not just for 100 people in a moldy little theater. It's for lots of people all around the world.
A lot of people. Joseph, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah, it's weird. I've done this a number of times now, but this is the first time really where it's like, usually, being in a bookstore and seeing it in, on the shelves, you get that like tactile sense. So being at home is this thing of like, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that people I don't know are reading it. That still feels theoretical to me.
Yeah, I totally get that. I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind everyone that I am going to be pulling from that sweet, sweet Q&A box throughout this talk. So if you have a burning question, just throw it in there to the Q&A little button you see down there, and I might just pull it out and ask it. So start writing those questions. But okay, Joseph, can we start with a little reading from you,
Sure.
from the book?
So this is the very first page, page 1. 2009 still feels like present tense. A decade passes so quickly. We met in the East Village, selling tickets for a downtown performance art collective called the New York Neo-Futurists, working in a tiny cubicle of a box office where the inner wall was a corkboard littered with programs for shows that had closed years before. Meg was interning with the Neo-Futurists, and I had recently auditioned for them and not been cast. Having nowhere else to go in New York, I subsequently showed up every weekend to their show, volunteering at their box office so that I wouldn't have to pay for tickets. The crash of 2008 had left me with few savings and no job. We were 22 and full of the posturing performance that substitutes for personality at that age. In a person's early 20s, the human being who eventually will form naturally with time has to be hastily scraped together from the shaky models of movies and social media. Meg was a constant smoker then, and so my first impression of her was a rolling wave of cigarette smell. My sense of smell is sensitive, and neither I nor anyone in my family ever smoked, so it set that first meeting on edge. But she also was clearly smart and determined and so entirely different from most people I had ever known. A slice of Jersey in my, until then, entirely Californian life. I didn't quite know what to make of her. But then I was such an uncertain mess at that age that I didn't know what to make of myself either. I don't remember us getting along well the first night we met, but I think we both knew that the conflict was as fake as the version of ourselves we were performing. There were deeper, quieter versions of us waiting to unfurl, and it was in those silent places that the heat between us lingered. The night we met, we went with the cast of the performance we had been selling tickets for to a restaurant in the East Village that doesn't exist anymore. Most restaurants in the East Village don't exist anymore. During the evening, it somehow came up that Meg loved seafood and I hate even the smell of seafood. Kevin R. Free, a member of the Neo-Futurists and a future member of the Welcome to Night Vale cast, laughed and said, "Well, you two will never have sex." We would tell that story many times in the future, and Meg would always end it the same way. And he was right.
Oh my God. So I know you guys very well, and not to brag, I married you to each other. So this is, just wanted to brag about that. So this book was such a pleasure to read, not only as a reader, but also because I know you, and it granted me even more access to your lives. I think one thing that struck me was clearly, each of you changed so much throughout the course of the book as the real yous changed from 2009 to 2019. This is a bit of a two-parter. What was it like to revisit that decade ago version of yourselves? Was it hard? Was it easily accessible? Was it right there at the tip of your head, tip of your tongue, tip of your fingers, however you want to see the metaphor? Was it accessible?
It was, in a way. I pride myself on saying I have a very good memory, but Joseph might disagree on that. So that's kind of how that goes. So yeah, I remember a lot of stuff. And also I was a writer, so I was constantly writing stuff. So I could go back and look at something I wrote in 2009, and that would open a window to who I was then. I also, through the loveliness of social media, I could look back at our Facebook from 2009 and see the day we met. All that stuff is kind of there for us as a record. Our first photos together, our trips that we took, going through the camera roll on my phone. It's sort of remarkable because it's so rare that we get to step back and look 10 years ago, look 6 years ago, and see the different versions of ourselves, because it doesn't feel like it's happening in the moment. It's so gradual. It's not like you wake up a different person, but you're such a markedly different person from year to year. I think especially in your 20s too. It's a very rife time for change. So looking at the abstract of that part of our lives, there's so much change. We're 10 completely different people during the course of those 10 years. We didn't feel it at the time. So yeah, the feeling of it is definitely jarring to go back and be like, I used to be a smoker who used to just smoke weed in my parents' garage. And that was like what I did with my time. And then all of a sudden I'm on the stage of the Sydney Opera House. And then all of a sudden, I'm trapped in my house for a year. So it's, which is, 200 miles from where I grew up. So
right.
It's the change happens gradually, but when you look back at it, it's jarring. Yeah.
Joseph, what about you?
It's interesting because, the first thing I did for each of these years was go back through the digital record that existed, which obviously, with like 2017, 2018, I could go to my Google timeline and literally on any day see exactly, I took a walk that day. I can see the route of the walk I took. All of that's logged in Google to sell me stuff with. But with the older stuff, it was mostly just going through Facebook because that was sort of the social media that existed for us in like 2008. And it was interesting going back through those posts and trying to reconstruct, because you have some record of like, okay, something happened that caused this post that day, but a lot of times, so the digital record was often less helpful than you would think, because it was often just like clues that you couldn't quite piece together without the details that were long since lost.
Yeah. Do you notice that change in each other too? Like, I think it's one thing to not notice change in yourself, but what about, have you seen the other person change? And was that accurately documented in the book?
I think for my knowing of Joseph changing, there's kind of pivotal points. So there really wasn't the big change for me in him. Was kind of when Night Vale became a very popular thing, is the biggest shift that I saw in him, because he went from trying as hard as he possibly could to get anyone to consider him a writer to many thousands of people around the globe telling them that they loved his writing and that they wanted more of his writing. So seeing that sort of shift of this is what I'm striving for to a goal achieved was sort of the biggest shift for him that I actually noticed in the moment, this is what it looks like to watch your partner's dreams come true. And this is how they change, and this is how they grow, and this is what they look like in this light. So that was, I guess, sort of the biggest shift. And is it accurate in the book? I think for him it is. And then I think it is reflected in the book, the sort of 2013 shift. That's sort of the binary, is we go from like doing a lot of growing up, learning how to adult, moving in together, to like, and hustling hard. And then in 2013, it becomes completely different. And it's learning how to become professional artists with real professional artist jobs and all of the cool stuff that professional artists get to do.
Yeah, I think we're both entirely different people than when we met, which I hope we would be. We're both 35. We met at 22. Like, I feel like if you don't radically change between those times, you were either the most interesting 22-year-old who ever lived, or something has gone wrong. And so I think we do our best to reflect those changes. It's really, really hard to see the changes in yourself. And it's sometimes even hard to see the changes in your partner because you're together all the time. And a lot of those changes are changes you're taking together, because so much of it is just the process of figuring out what you look like, as what your life looks like together. It's a series of fitting those pieces together until gradually you're new people that fit together.
Yeah. So one thing I really appreciated about the book so much was you really openly talk about fights and fighting. And I mean that very sincerely. I think that's actually like one of the biggest gifts like you can give other people in relationships, is like to be open about that kind of stuff. Was that hard to write about?
Yes and no. Hey, a story needs conflict, right? So, but our when we first pitched this book to Harper Perennial, our editor was like, "I want you to go deep. Like, I want you. I want to see this. This is what you're writing a book about, a relationship. You have to be honest, and you have to. This is something that you encounter in your relationship. It's something that's important to share." So it's tough to write about because you're not always at your best when you're arguing with your partner. I would say you're not. So it's like a sort of an ugly part of yourself, is the part of you that doesn't get along. or is struggling to figure out something together. But fighting, I think learning how to be in a happy, healthy relationship is learning how to disagree and learning how to fight with each other. And that's something that we did. When our early days, when we first moved in together, there was a lot of fighting that was not as respectful of each other as our fighting is now. You know, like it's never, I think, learning how to really try not to hurt them, but get your point across, like how to totally say what you need for them to hear without trying to hurt them, to get them, like to twist them into getting them where you want to be, is a really important skill in a healthy relationship, which is, you know, we're not 100% there. We still fight in not the cutest ways, but I feel like we're definitely a lot more respectful of still wanting to love each other after the disagreement.
No, but that's good. It's so nice to see people like very honestly talk about it. One time, my husband Todd and I were in we were in a restaurant. We were getting into like a little bit of an argument, and then there was a couple 2 tables down. There was no one in between us, and they were also fighting. And I was like, they should create bars where couples just come and have their fight, because there was almost something not in a like Schadenfreude way, but like there was something almost like, okay, other couples are arguing right now. This is a normal thing. And I found it so just like beautiful and relatable when you talked about it, you know?
Yeah, that story reminded me of a thing I miss, which is sitting in a restaurant listening to other couples.
Oh my God.
Which is, I've seen this thing sometimes where people are like, these couples who have been together so long, they just sit at a restaurant and they have nothing to talk about and they're just silently eating their food. No, they're not. What they're doing is they're listening to you.
Yes.
There's been so many meals where like the couple next and the table next to us is so interesting that we're both just like making eye contact the entire time.
And then the whole drive home or the whole walk home, we're like going back over and be like, and then she said this. What do you think she meant by that? And then he said that.
Yeah.
How long? And they've probably only been together about this amount of time.
What do you think? Second day?
I can
third
tell
day?
from that. Yeah, so they're kind of just piecing together their whole story. So if you're the kind of person who does that, I recommend this book to you, which is a whole.
I mean,
I missed that so bad though. I would, yeah.
It's a big old eavesdrop into another couple's dinner conversation.
No, it's really good. Shall we move on to our second reading?
Okay. So I'm going to read actually something from 2018. I talk a lot about food in this book because I'm a person who has food issues. So I've had I've kind of struggled with disordered eating for most of my life. And so I love to talk about food. It's something that is very interesting to me. It's something that's very much at the forefront of my mind all the time because of the way my brain works. So in the 2018 chapter, I included 3 recipes, and these are recipes that we eat all the time. One of them is the smoothie that I make Joseph for breakfast every morning. Any morning we're home, literally we eat this. And for years too, like we're very boring about this. The other one is dessert that Joseph likes to make. That is pretty much just frozen dessert. So either frozen yogurt or ice cream with a little bit of milk and a little bit of cereal stirred together in a bowl, which is a classic dessert in this house. And then I have the Manic Pixie Dream Shiksahala, which when Joseph and I first got together, we were working every Friday and Saturday night, so we never really had a time to do a Shabbos dinner. And I was a Catholic girl from New Jersey, so I really didn't have any sort of insight into what this was like at all. And then after I stopped performing every weekend, I was able to learn how to make challah and try to be a good little shiksa wife to my lovely Jewish husband. And it's been really great to get to learn more about Judaism and the traditions of it through food, because again, I'm a food person. So that's my access point into anyone's anything. It's like, so what do we eat that day? And what does that mean? So learning how to make challah was really something that's been fun for me. And I make a really lovely challah these days. And this is the Manic Pixie Dream Shiksa challah. I'm not going to read the ingredients because the ingredients are in the book. And also you can figure it out. So I will just read the recipe. Dissolve the yeast in warm water in a large mixing bowl. Add 2 teaspoons of honey and let the mixture sit for 5 minutes until the yeast has bloomed. Add the slightly cooled melted butter, the remaining honey, 1 egg, rosemary, salt, and lemon zest Stir to combine. Add the whole wheat and white flours a half a cup at a time and stir between additions to incorporate until a wet dough has been formed. You may not need all the flour, or you may need more. Maybe I would know exactly how much you would need if I was one of the chosen people, but I am not. Sprinkle a clean countertop or cutting board with flour and knead the dough. Add more flour as needed to stop sticking until the dough bounces back when poked. 5 to 7 minutes of consistent kneading. I like to stare off into the distance as I knead and think of all of the women who came before me who make this bread each week, and how even some of them, like me, were dressed up as a bride at 8 years old, married to Jesus, and fed his body in the form of crackers by a man wearing a gilded bathrobe. Form the dough into a ball. Place the dough ball back into the mixing bowl, cover with a clean dishcloth, and place the dough somewhere warm for at least an hour or until it has doubled in size. In my house, our bedroom gets warm in the later afternoon, so I proof my dough up there. We call it the master breadroom. After the dough has risen, give it a light punch down and turn it out of the bowl back onto the floured surface. Divide the dough into 4 equal ropes and braid them together, 1 rope over each until a loaf has been formed. Or watch a couple videos of challah braiding on YouTube and get flour all over your phone for inspiration. Place the loaf on a parchment-lined baking sheet and cover with a clean dishcloth and let rest for 15 minutes. Preheat the oven to 375 degrees, beat the remaining egg in a small bowl and brush it onto the loaf. Sprinkle the sesame seeds and flaky sea salt over the loaf. Bake for 25 to 35 minutes, rotating once. Your oven is not my oven. We all have different experiences and lives that lead us to this very moment. Don't burn the bread. It's done when it's golden and smells so good that you will have a hard think about how you were taught that some shitty ass dry cracker was God, when obviously God is right before you and it's something you made with your own hands. Serve it right from the oven with butter. Learn the blessing for the bread that you say before you eat it from your patient spouse who married you even though their grandma gave them shit about it.
Yay. Okay, we love this. Can we talk about, so one thing I just want to throw in, and I'm just fangirling right now, this book is so funny. It is just hilarious. I found myself laughing out loud through it. Just wanted to throw that in. That's my own little sell for this book. One thing I wanted to ask is, you mentioned, so you didn't show each other what you were writing until the end, right?
Yeah, that was sort of the plan. We didn't show each other while we were writing them. We would often show each other kind of after we had written. Like, we've both finished 2019. Let's read each other's 2019. But yeah, the goal, we didn't talk about it beforehand. We tried our best to not like discuss our plans other than kind of very generally to make sure we weren't writing the exact same essay. You know, we didn't want to come out to find that we had both like centered on this one aspect of the year in basically the same way. So we would kind of be like, I'm going to maybe talk about this. And the other person would be like, oh, great. Because that year I'm actually going to talk about this. And then that way we wouldn't cover the same subject.
No, I was just going to say there was planning. I'm sorry, I'm pulling up the Q&A, not to remind everyone. I was pulling up the Q&A to get a question. But Joseph, I feel like I cut you off.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
okay, great.
Yeah, we didn't really consult. We kind of, we would look at something before we sent it over to our editor, just to, it's, it's very nerve wracking to send something over to the editor. Like, just read this just to make sure this makes sense at all and is good. And so that was nice to have. But yeah, there was no real commentary from each other that affected any of the shaping of the story.
Were you nervous? How did that feel?
About reading each other's after?
Yeah. or actually, that's great. Two-parter. How did it feel when you had to share it with the other?
I felt fine. Yeah, I don't think I would have proposed this project if it didn't feel like our relationship could withstand the scrutiny. Scrutiny. That's a word I can say. But it's like I feel like the reason this project made sense to me was because our relationship was so strong that it felt like, even if things come up where we disagree about what happened, that it won't be a huge problem.
Yeah. I I want to move on to an audience question, not to brag. First one coming in hot from Josie. Did remembering things differently as you were writing this cause any disagreements or arguments?
Yeah. Totally.
Talk to us. We want details. Josie and I speak for me and Josie. We're a team now.
So I spent 10 years with a theater company called the New York Neo-Futurists, wherein we only tell the truth on stage. And we go to great painstaking detail to make sure what we are saying is the truth. Like if someone asks me what I had for breakfast, I have to answer them with the right answer. So I am like an avowed, if you write something and say that it's true, it must be true. So when I would get something from Joseph that I remember differently, I would be like, I can fact check this. Like I have the receipts. I can go and show you that we were in this city on this day, based on an email or based on a receipt or whatever. So, but trying to avoid that impulse was something that I had to learn to do, because that's not what this book is about. This book is about my version and Joseph's version. It's not about what the hard truth is. It's what we remember. That's what a memoir is. You can fact check it to the best of your ability, but for us, the art that we're trying to create is maybe the divide, where we divide and where we come together in memory. So resisting that urge to be like, you're wrong and here's why is something that I had to kind of really claw back.
Yeah,
Joseph?
I mean, there's stuff we definitely remember differently. My impulse was just sort of like, well, that's sort of the point, right? Like I'm like, I don't know, you're probably right that I'm misremembering the dates, but also like that's the point, is that we're telling the stories we remember. And so for me, it was I there wasn't much that I like got kind of in my head about like, no, this is wrong, because it's just like, well, that's the whole idea. Are kind of, I guess, on a selfish level, like artistically, the project doesn't work if we both remember everything exactly the same. Right. It has to be remembered differently for the project to make any sense. So it kind of, for me, I'm like, well, this is great. We remember this differently. Perfect.
It worked. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you, Josie, for the question. Did that ever, like in terms of the fact checking, because I share that with you, Meg, but in terms of the fact checking, was there anything that you put your foot down that was like, this can't be in there?
There was some stuff from 2011 that I wanted to make sure that Joseph got right. In 2011, Joseph talks about losing his father, which is a time of obviously very difficult in someone's life. So their memory might not be the clearest thing possible. But in telling the story, I thought it would be important for Joseph to make sure that those facts were right for him, and then also for any sort of family that would be reading it, that they could kind of be in line with that. So that was something that I encouraged you to talk with your mom about, to make sure that you had lined up.
Yeah, it was, I thought you were going to bring up a different disagreement in that chapter. In that chapter, there was some like date disagreement that I very intentionally, I'm like, I'm sure you're right, but I'm just leaving it as is, because this is how I remember it. But I did, at Meg's urging, I did have kind of, and it's a tough conversation to have, to like, sorry, I'm trying to stay out of this very bright sunlight.
I know. I also was just hit by the sun. I'm gonna
come with me as I try to escape the sunlight.
I love it. I'm here.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation, obviously, but it was a really interesting one to just kind of sit down, because at the time, a lot of the stuff I wasn't clear on, because I was just trying to kind of react to what was happening, and so to really be like, what kind of step by step what happened. There was a lot I didn't know. There was a lot of stuff that, I just, the details of what happened that I just wasn't aware of. So that was it was valuable for the book, because I got all those details right, but it was also valuable for me personally, just because I had a better understanding of what happened there.
Yeah. Meg, I know you write a lot of nonfiction just from your work with the Neo-Futurists and your other writing. Joseph, what did it feel like this is your first nonfiction book. Do you write a lot of nonfiction just for yourself?
No, it's interesting. I actually got a lot more practice this year. I started a podcast called Our Plague Year that features a lot of just me talking about this year. And so kind of ended up being these essays throughout the year. So I had a lot more practice with it. I hadn't written nonfiction really in a very long time, but Yeah, I don't know. I feel like once you know how to tell a story, that's most of it.
Mhm.
And while I won't make the argument that I'm like a master of memoir or something. I'm sure there's lots of memoir techniques that I don't know. I still do know how to like put words together on a page in a way that's interesting. And so I felt pretty comfortable with that. The main thing was really just the stuff about like, well, I guess kind of the beauty of this project is the stuff I hate about nonfiction is the possibility of getting stuff wrong, which is
Mm.
why I write about surreal worlds that are
Yeah.
intentionally ridiculous. But since this whole project was about getting things wrong, that seemed fine.
Yeah. Meg, did you learn anything new about nonfiction writing? Because so for people who don't know, and let's assume that's everyone, neo-futurist writing is nonfiction, but it's also very specific. Was there anything different about this book that either I'm sure you leaned on a lot of neo-futuristic teachings for this, but what was new?
I mean, the length. So yeah, neo-futurist work is traditionally very short. So expanding from something that normally I write 500-word monologues, and that's my kind of bread and butter. But now I'm writing 2,500-word essays. So kind of learning how to expand with the breadth of a story, being able to tell a lot more of a story, which I think is great. With neo-futurism, it's just distill, get it down to its essence, which is great. But sometimes you want a little bit more than the essence. It's okay to have some different types of notes and a little bit more backstory. So getting to sort of play around in things that I would normally cut because, I'd cut for time, I got to really delve into. So that was something that was new for me. And then also just kind of, what I write, it's to be performed. So writing for the page. So something that kind of has the reader's eye as well as the reader's ear, because we do have an audiobook that is very fun and funny, and we had a great time recording it. But this book is written for the page, so that's a different style, and something that I really enjoyed getting to expand upon.
That's amazing. Ready for another Q&A question?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just
this one is. You're doing great. It's like a monster that's like slowly gonna eat you. Not to brag, do you not have curtains?
I do not.
Okay.
We can just keep scooting this way though.
I just drew my curtains.
It's on a lazy. My computer's on a lazy Susan, so we can just keep rotating.
I love that. Oh my God. Okay, now you're gonna be in a different room. We're getting a whole tour. Okay, this one is coming from Aaron. The debate of who actually paid for the morning after pill was absolutely hilarious on the reader side. How often does that debate come up? Do either of you have evidence to back up your side?
It basically never comes up, and I'm sure she's right. I just had vague memories of giving her money, but I'm sure that was just a kind of amplification in my head because it made the story more interesting.
It's not something that we still continue to fight about, as it is a bit later, and it all worked out. So, but I remember when we I actually don't know. He might have given me money. We're definitely squared up now. Let's say that. We it's taken care of.
We were all keeping tabs at home. I have a big scoreboard.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Erin. This one is coming from Laura. Hi, Laura. We know Laura. Okay, wait, sorry, 2 questions from Laura. Who did you write this book for? Who did you have in mind for who would read it?
It's an interesting question. You never know who your audience is going to be. Like when we wrote Night Vale as a podcast, it was really just written because it seemed a fun project for us. And when this kind of much younger audience showed up, it was certainly an audience we welcomed, but it was not an audience we had in mind because we had no audience in mind. So similarly, I don't think I went into this with like, here's who we're writing this for, other than I think obviously because it is this stretch of time that we went from being in our early 20s to being in our early 30s. I think people, within 10 years of our age might recognize those cultural touchstones of like, oh yeah, I remember graduating from college right as the economy disappeared. It's a pretty memorable thing to have happen to you. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it might be that this becomes a huge hit among the 60 plus market, and that's great, and I love it.
I think, yeah, I agree with Joseph that we wrote it just to tell our story and hope that it would hit someone. That's kind of all you really can do as a storyteller is just put it out there. But I'm a person who really enjoys memoir. I really enjoy reading other people's stories. I find so much value in hearing about other people's lives, whether those lives be so deeply extraordinary or so incredibly ordinary. I find them equally as fascinating. So I think that's what I kind of strive to do with my story. I've definitely had some very extraordinary aspects of my life, and I've had some very ordinary aspects of my life and some very normal, kind of relatable aspects of my life. I feel like there's a lot of people who could relate to some of the stuff that I've been through, but there's some stuff that only I've been through. Like, that's just a unique story. So as a reader and a consumer of stories, I find a lot of value in everyone's individual story. So I wrote that for a reader who finds that similar thing, the fascination of people and humanity.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're getting a lot of questions, which is very exciting. I'm going to try to get to them all. From Anne, why did Joseph's grandma not approve of the marriage? Just religion? Question mark. I said that wrong. Why did Joseph's grandma not approve of the marriage? Just religion?
Not to paint her in a negative light. She was always very lovely to me and very nice and never made me feel like an outsider. I do think, and I'm speaking for her and for Joseph here, I do think that she would have had appreciated that Joseph life partner with a Jewish woman.
My grandma Betty I remember when Mad Men came out and there's Betty Draper. And it really helped me understand my grandma because my grandma was Betty Draper, almost exactly. She was, I remember I briefly dropped out of college for about a year. I dropped out of college. And it was about a year after my dad started having the heart troubles that would eventually kill him. And I remember she called me and told me that me dropping out of college was what was killing my father. So my grandma had a way with words. I think she loved in her own way.
I mean, faith comes up throughout the book. What were the kind of conversations you guys had with each other? I mean, Joseph, it was quite literally your major, but what are the kinds of conversations that come up between you guys about faith and how you identify, how you don't identify?
Yeah. So I was, for the early part of my youth, raised like Italian American Catholic in North Jersey. And then that sort of fizzled out as I didn't do confirmation or anything. My parents thought I should kind of make that choice for myself. And I did. And it was not, being a part of the Catholic Church was not something that interested me. I consider myself an atheist. And I was definitely a little bit more strong-headed about my lack of love for organized religion when I met Joseph, but then getting to kind of see his and his family's experience with Judaism and the traditions that they are involved with Judaism, I got it. I was like, okay, I understand why someone would be a religion now. I understand why you would do this. So that's been a really cool thing, is having those doors kind of open in my mind. I don't identify as Jewish. I guess I'm Jewish adjacent, like it's Jewish supporting, especially when it comes to the food. I will cater any sort of Jewish holiday, and I will do the research to make sure that it is appropriate. But that's kind of my access point to it. But I've softened over the years with it. I think as a kind of more hard-headed younger person, I was like, why would anyone be, in a religion? All religions, be obedient to the masses or whatever. But learning about his faith and his practices, I was like, oh, I get this. This is something that I could see, kind of have empathy towards and have curiosity about.
Yeah, it's, for me, Judaism has nothing to do with like a word like faith or like belief. It to me, Judaism is is what you do. It's a series of actions, essentially. Like Judaism does not ask you to believe anything. It just asks you to follow a set of rules, essentially. So in that way, in practice, Meg is currently as Jewish as I am, and that she does kind of the same Jewish things as me. It mainly came up like when we talked about having children. It was really, really important to me that they be Jewish. That Judaism is a very, very small sliver of this world, and I couldn't imagine having children and not passing on that legacy of Judaism to them.
You segued to a big topic. We got the last chapter of the book. So I have 2 copies of the book. One is the arc, and that it was a reveal at the end. But then it's in the published copy. It's in the acknowledgments. So we get to know what the big surprise is from the end. Okay, big questions. Can we talk due date? How are we feeling?
So we're having our first baby. So we spoilers for how our 2020 and 2021 are going to go. This book is dedicated to our daughter, who we don't know yet. I'm due at the end of June, so we're kind of closing in on the final days here. We're feeling good. Yeah. How you doing?
Yeah, I feel about as prepared as a person can be, really. We've both read a lot of books. It's one of those things, though, that like you can prepare, but the thing I can't do is imagine it, really. Like I feel it's one of those things that I won't know what it feels like until it happens, because it just is not a thing that I have any frame of reference for in my life.
Yeah. You have created the perfect gift, though. Like this is, as good as it gets. What else can you give this human child who's going to join you so soon? Is she going to read immediately?
Oh God. I hope.
It was hard enough having our parents read the book.
Yeah, I'm not sure I was ever read it.
I was going to ask, how was it having your family read it?
It was, our families we're very lucky. Our family are very supportive, and they know who we are. So we're no secret to them. They understand who we are as people, and they accept and love us. But literally handing over the copy to my mother-in-law, I was like, it's a very personal book. Don't feel like you have to read it. And she read it and was very lovely and effusive about it. But like, just being like handing over the book to your mother-in-law, being like, yes, I love your son. This is how our whole relationship is like, so
that's
hearing back from my mom on it, which is my mom and I are very open, but so she definitely was like kind of came at it like from a distance, being like, I really enjoyed the book, I thought it was very funny, like, but kind of it's
when did they get it in the process?
We waited until there was arcs. So we waited until there was like hard copies to hand them. So so a couple, maybe a month or 2 ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I feel like Lydia just read it.
Yeah. So
Lydia is learning about it now on this chat.
She's in there, I'm sure. Yeah. I think she's.
Oh, Lydia, we know, honey. Hi, Lydia, wherever you may be. Kathy, do we have Kathy here? Queen
I don't know if Kathy's here tonight. Maybe, probably. I don't know.
We love you both. Oh, Lydia. She joined the chat. Okay. We have a Nightville question from Josie again. I don't want to do doubles, but Josie, did Meg's pregnancy play any part in the decision to give Cecil and Carlos a child in Welcome to Night Vale?
No, because that's a decision we made long before Meg was pregnant. Completely unrelated.
Okay, great. We're moving on to a question from Margaret. What was the most frustrating thing you remember differently?
Yeah, I don't
know. I'm trying to think if there's anything that like really frustrated me. I think it's just because at this point, I'm so far kind of removed from the initial reading of it. I've read these passages so many times that they've kind of worn away at any of that frustration. Yeah. And now it's just like, well, this is our story. This is the story. This is how it's always been. I think when you create a book, you have to get so close to it that it's you kind of sand away all of your feelings about it until it just becomes like, Dylan, you just wrote a book, like.
I'm in the final stretches, but I look forward to talking about it in the past tense. Yeah, I get it.
But you've gone through it over and over it so many times that it's like, it sort of is just like, the only feeling I have is that I want to hand this over. So
yeah. The sandpaper analogy is that's exactly what it feels like. You're like, this was once warm and pulsating for me. Like it's like a memory that you're like, whoa, it's like so fresh. I feel it. And then when you're on your like third draft of it, you're like, what are feelings? And have I ever had them before? Yeah, I get that.
I always hit a place with a project before I finish it where I just lose all sense of whether it's good or bad. Because have been so deep in it for so long that you just kind of have to trust the process and trust your gut. But I'm like, I just can't. It really makes you understand how like terrible movies get made or whatever. Because it's just like once you've been so deep in the process and like years in, you lose all ability to step back and be like, but wait a second, is it good?
Oh, yes. Okay, moving on to a big topic. The squirrels on the cover. Wait, it just disappeared. From Avery. What brought you to choose squirrels for the book cover? And I think there's a reveal that we have to make.
So we were thinking about what we want for this book cover. Our lovely publisher, we sent them some ideas, and what they came back with did not feel like us at all. And we were like, we need something that's weirder. We need something that's like a little punkier, a little something like more bizarre that kind of reflects like the kind of the weirdness of us. So there's a part in 2010 where I talk about us kayaking in a boat together, and that's sort of a metaphor for relationships. And there's also when I first told Joseph that I loved him, it was because I was startled by a squirrel that I was trying to free that had become trapped on my porch, and I kind of panicked and just told him that I loved him. So there's that sort of squirrel thing, boat thing. So I literally just Googled like taxidermied squirrels, and this was the picture that came up. So we sent this to the publisher, and our publisher lovingly made it into a gorgeous cover and got it all nice and high res. And then so I was looking for a gift. It's Meg's first book. I wanted to get her a gift to celebrate the book release. And so I was like, oh, we should own these squirrels. Like this is straight up from a like taxidermy store. That's where we got this photo. And so I'm like, they're for sale. We should own the ones on the cover. And then I went and they had been sold already. Wow. But that's when I found out that squirrels in canoes is for some reason a very popular taxidermy subject. And there's hundreds of them. And so I found this nearly identical one right down to the pose.
Wait, seriously?
This is... We put a little squirrel in, a little baby squirrel.
So this is not the one from the cover, but it looks a lot like it.
I mean, this is really cool. It's like, when Scooby-Doo, when they released the live action version and they released stills, I felt very excited. That's what I feel like I'm seeing now. I feel like I'm seeing Matthew Lillard play Shaggy right now. So thank you for that experience. Meg, first book. How are we feeling? Congratulations. So proud of you.
So this is something that I've been wanting to do for years. I pretty much exclusively read memoir and love it. And definitely it was like, I want to do this. I want to be a nonfiction writer. I want to write essays. This is what I want to do. And waking up this morning as a published author is just an incredible feeling. It felt really wonderful. And I feel so lucky that I was able to work on this book with Joseph and that we were able to get this out there. We have such a wonderful agent who really encouraged us. Jody, she's terrific. And she really encouraged us to do this and really encouraged me and made me feel really confident as a first-time writer, which was really great. And the Harper Perennial team and Mary, our editor, also, again, really encouraged us and made, like, it's hard to walk into a room and be like, do I belong in here? And they never made me feel like I didn't, which is really lovely. So yeah, well, lots of big scary feelings, but really, really proud and really happy to be here.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge. You did it. I'm proud of you. This is big. This is big. Let's get into the nitty gritty. How are we on time? Okay, we're good. I want, sadly, 10 minutes until the hour. I want to talk about writing process. What do you, just like the bare bones of it, like how do you each attack the page? Do you have a ritual? Would love to hear.
For me, I'm very, very focused on structure. I always like to know, even before content, I want to know the shape of the thing. That's really important. I often go into a work knowing kind of about how long it'll be. I'll be like, I'm kind of aiming for this length. And so that kind of helps me think about it. So with a lot of these, I would kind of gather a lot of memories and make a big list and then look at them and try to figure out a structure. And like sometimes that structure ended up disappearing because it just no longer made sense. I had one of the essays where I have a whole thing talking about the difference between us when it comes to sleeping, that she sleeps very easily and I have a really hard time sleeping, and the effect that had on our relationship. And my original idea for the essay, the way I structured it, was I kind of had little bits about that throughout the essay and then kind of went back and forth between that and the memories. And the edit and our editor, Mary, was like, this doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't flow for me. And so it ended up, the entire structure I built the piece around, I ended up abandoning, and I just kind of made that passage about sleep the ending. So sometimes the structure doesn't last, but I need it to start. I need to know what the shape of the thing is.
Yeah, I'm also a structure person. So for me, it was, for each chapter, I wanted to have a specific structure to adhere to, or a specific device to adhere to, or a specific challenge that I gave myself for it. Like there's 2 chapters that are just one day. So my 2009 chapter is just one day as remembered of that year. And my 2018 chapter is just one day of my life, but it's sort of like the average day. So 2009 is an actual day and 2018 is an average day. So like kind of an amalgamation. So using those sort of devices to tell stories. There's also one that is a how-to. There's 2014 is a how-to chapter. So kind of finding a game, finding a structure, finding a device, and then hanging my story upon that framework. So that's always been helpful for me. If it's like, if you build a really gorgeous frame, then you can throw the house up pretty quick. And it feels easy to put the house together when the frame exists. And I also think that's fun for the reader too, because readers really understand structure. So it helps them stay engaged in the book and keep turning the pages, because they sort of know how it's going to go.
We love a good structure and are ready to see it subverted. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, which is why there's recipes and
What about like just like daily rituals? Like what are your because you guys are really, I would say, prolific, productive people. How do you get it done?
I wish I had daily rituals. That sounds nice. It's mostly just when I can work it into a day. You know, there's not one way that I need to write. I've especially when we were touring, I've written in like airports and written in on airplanes and written in hotels and backstage, just kind of getting it done. It just goes on this long to-do list and I kind of get to it when I can. I try to prioritize it. I try to do it first, because once I start answering business emails it's so hard to move your brain back
change
to
the
that.
brain. Yeah.
I mean, the main thing is, if at all possible, I like to write standing up. I'm just more comfortable standing up, and I like to write while listening to very loud music, because I feel like it gives me writing is such a stationary thing that I need some energy to it. And so listening to like really loud instrumental music allows me to kind of feel some energy while I'm working.
Yeah, for me, it's trying to kind of have it be the first task of the day, aside from awaking and feeding yourself, is to get to the writing. But for me, it's really important to be able to step back from it. So not be in such a time crunch where I don't have time to let it breathe. I like to write in the morning and then go for a run or a walk, and then sort of let my brain relax off of it. And then my brain can sort of solve the problems that I know I created in the writing in the morning. And then I can be like, okay, I have this idea on how to fix this, or I have this idea on how I want to tell this specific story. So allowing myself to have the time on the page and then the time away from the page to be able to revise and come back. I'm huge into revision. That is really where the writing is for me, is like I get it out and then I have to step away and then like revise and actually make it a thing and allow my brain to step away to solve the problems.
Fascinating. I'm torn. There are a few things I want to ask. Time is running out. I want to quickly ask if you could distill, this is maybe an unfair question because it would be challenging for me. So if you want to pass it off and say, I don't want to answer this, that's fine. If you could distill, each of you separately, what you've learned in these last 10 years into one thing that you could share with people, how would you summarize the last 10 years, the lesson you've learned over the last 10 years with each other?
Mine's relationship advice, just simple, like a strong relationship is about good communication and learning to ask for what you need.
Yeah.
That's the crux of a good relationship, is being able to ask your partner for what you need, not being afraid to ask for what you need. And hopefully they can give it back to you. But if not, having that conversation, they can love you so much, but they can't read your mind. So,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think relationship wise, for me, a relationship is just a continuing conversation. It's an active thing. It's a verb, not a noun. You have to just kind of every single day keep doing that relationship. It's not a thing that just lives on its own. That's been the main thing. Everything else about our lives over the last 10 years has been so like bizarre and completely based on luck that I don't know if there's any lesson to be drawn from that, other than I guess like have your podcast blow up on a website you've never heard of, and then that'll change your life completely.
Great. That's actionable advice, everyone. Have your podcast blow up. Last question coming from Anne. What did you feel most vulnerable writing about?
Probably the disordered eating stuff for me. Then the dealing into some of the stuff with the body stuff and it's a defining part of who I am. But it's definitely tough to write about. And I know I'm not alone. It's many people in the world suffer from and thrive through these issues. But it was hard to sit down and write my story, but I'm happy that I did.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was the recent chapters, because the early stuff, that version of me is so long gone, is so different from who I am now, that it felt not that revealing to talk about it. It felt like telling stories about a person who's no longer here. But, I do write fiction, and in a lot of ways, I don't love having myself in view in front of that fiction. I used to say about book tours that I wish on that first book tour I'd hired an actor to play me, who would just go out and be me in the world, and I could just sit and write. And so the recent years where I kind of had to talk about how my life is now felt very vulnerable for me, because it was stepping out behind the fiction and being like, this is who I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, real last question. Who would play you guys in the movie adaptation of the first 10 years?
God, Jeffrey had good casting that I don't remember anymore.
I don't know. It's hard. I'm trying to think. Maybe Kat Dennings could play me, or Adie Bryant, or
great casting choices.
So many good ones.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think for you. Elijah Wood.
Yes, Elijah.
Okay.
Okay, great. Elijah Wood and Kat Dennings and Adie Bryant.
I love that so much. Thank you all. We here at Politics in Prose really want to thank Meg Bashwiner, Joseph Fink, and Dylan Marron for this incredible conversation, and our audience out there for chiming in with those really engaging, insightful questions. Your patronage and dedication enable us to have these sorts of events, and we couldn't do it without the book sales to support them. So we hope you'll follow the link in the chat to purchase your copy of The First 10 Years, Two Sides of the Same Love Story, or just pop over to politics-prose.com. And while you're there, you can check out the rest of our events calendar to see what we've got coming up. And from our shelves to yours, we really hope everyone out there is staying safe, staying strong, and of course, staying well read. And we will see you next time.